Welcome to the evening review. My name is Uhane, and joining me is regular guest Olsen Kahiriri. Welcome to the evening review. Of course, I guess welcomes are no longer necessary.
Thanks for having me.
Um, we've seen now quite extraordinary developments coming out of South Africa, where the African National Congress has sunk to below 40%, sunk to 40%, and is unable to form a government by itself and needs coalition partners. From your view, what do you make of that outcome?
Yeah, you see, given the two Namibian and South African constitutions being different, when you look at how presidents are elected and things like that, it's quite interesting times, because all these years it has been ANC that has been dominating the National Assembly, and through the National Assembly is where the president is elected and the government is formed through the elections of such a president. Now we have seen that indeed ANC have not received the 40%, have not received more than 50% votes. They are now at 40%, which makes it very difficult for them to establish a government. And you know, in our instance, is the president is elected by the voters themselves, and he forms the government. So it's quite interesting times, and it teaches us that the hard work of liberation struggles are coming to hand them. The promises that they have been doing for years and years, because this is not a surprising development in South Africa, because ANC have been losing votes. They have been declining in terms of the local administration. They have lost the biggest metropolitan. You know, when big giants, big political movements are losing or about to disappear, they disappear in urban areas. Where the biggest metropolitans are, where the people understand the actions of those institutions. So it was something that we were expecting, because of the non-service delivery and non-accomplishments of promises that they have been doing for over 30 years now. So it's nothing strange. But for us who are in Namibia, we should not take the South African saga at this moment in time. It looks like an opera. It's something else. We should not take it lightly, because even the wheat that we have in this country is coming from South Africa, and it's where our bread will come from, and the most mealies come from South Africa, is where our porridge is coming from. So the sugar is coming from there, the majority of it. So it means that what is being decided on Friday after these elections is going to affect us.
And I wanted to come there. How do you see, because we are going to the polls in November to elect members to represent us in the National Assembly, and ultimately also a president. And just how do you think what has happened in South Africa will have any bearing in terms of how the ruling party SWAPO performs, and where would you now put the emergence of the Independent Patriots for Change, which, by the look of things, seems to be building quite a solid base, as well as other opposition parties, of course.
You see what happens in South Africa. From my analysis, those who are architects of creating political parties and cooking the elections results and things like that, and influencing the results that comes out, either through creating political parties or funding them and all these things, knew that ANC was finding itself in a vulnerable situations, and they will have protest votes. And these protest votes could have gone to any political party. But lucky enough, came the MK, without branches, without offices, without anything, without election campaigns and what. They came, took the protest votes, and you would see that those protest votes, the biggest beneficiary before the arrival of the MK would have been the EFF. So the unfortunate happened that the MK came, that they took one of the most admired president in the history of South Africa, which is Zuma, coming from the Zulu functions, who also played a critical role in 1989 when there were a serious uprising between the ANC and Inkatha Freedom Front. So a very charismatic leader who they put at the front page, and they loaded their campaigns onto court applications that were taking place here. Sometimes they would be called not to take part. Sometimes the leader should not be on the ballots and all these things. And this gave them more strength because the media was always on their eye. And those protest voters eventually migrated to the MK. So it brought now these results that we have, whereby no one in South Africa can govern without the assistance of others. But the South African people have given them, the voters have given them the picture that they have now, which is, for me, is a quite good one. Because the corrupt ANC leaders who have been at the helm of the government for all these years cannot be protected by parliament. You remember the president's Palapala case. He was protected by the majority vote in parliament. Now, if something of that magnitude come again in parliament, who will protect you if you have 40% votes?
Yes.
Yeah, you understand? So what the South African voters have given the political parties is what one would wish in Namibia. Because at the end of the day, whoever is corrupt will not be protected by the system. And one would pray that such result will get into Namibia. I don't know what the political parties will be doing between now and November. But what happened in South Africa is a classical example of people who were born in the 90s, in 1990 when Namibia, and 1994 when South Africa got independent, have now become adults. In the South African context, they are expected, because South Africa got independent in 1994, and they are expected to be at the age of 30. Now you have people between the age of 30 to 18 who never experienced the slogans of liberations and all these things, who have become voters, who will humble these promises and things like that. So they've put the ball onto the politicians. It's up to the politicians now if they are able to work with each other. It's not about personal interest. It's not about political interest of your party. It is about the common interest of the country. But how are they going to strike that? If you bring what they are currently speaking, a government of national unity, which was also at the time of the first administration was back then, it becomes now a deja vu. That is a clear sign that the ANC has failed the South African people. Because why would you come back to the drawing board of something that you crafted back when you got independent? And so it means that when you built the South Africa that you took or inherited from the apartheid system, you messed up, because now you are going back to where you started. So it means that for 30 years, it was a wasteful time in South African history, because now we are going back to the drawing board. So it will be havoc, chaos on Friday when South Africa is about to elect its president and see who will be the speaker, who will be the president of the country, who will be the ministers of certain portfolios. You would hear that the EFF was saying that Floyd should be the Minister of Finance. And here you hear from the DA, they want their leader to become the vice president. And because in a government of national unity, the presidents, as it's stipulated, should be 2 vice presidents. So this would come out of the negotiations that they are taking place behind the scene. But if you look at the MK is not coming to these discussions. They don't have an interest in coalition government. What I heard currently is the MK is in the street recruiting, because Zuma recently said that they are going for a rerun. And you can't close the rerun out, because if on Friday the parties cannot agree to have a president, then they must go for a rerun. The current president that is there can dissolve the parliament, and then they go for a rerun. If they can't find a president. So it's a quite interesting and difficult times, and also a learning curve as what is happening in South Africa.
Commissar, I'd like to come back to the issue of the South African elections and its bearing on Namibia, given the proximity that the two countries have. But before we continue those discussions, I'd like to call for a commercial break. We'll see you shortly.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Welcome back to the Evening Review. Commissar, you have not, I do not feel you've addressed the issue sufficiently in terms of the bearing of the South African elections on Namibia, which also brings me to ask, because we are seeing a maturity of politics. We saw it with the City of Windhoek Council, where opposition parties amongst themselves were able to form a coalition within council, and effectively, for the first time since independence, shut SWAPO out completely out of managing the affairs of the City of Windhoek. Given that experience, how far do you think we've come, and have opposition parties in Namibia taken the Namibian nation into confidence to display to them that they are able to govern effectively?
Yeah, you see, coalition governments are not easy. They are very difficult. They are based on negotiations. They are based on compromise of your positions and principles that you find yourself, because every political party has its own own agenda. It has own policy. It has its own manifesto. It has its own interest to the national cake. So having a coalition government is not an easy process, and we learn it in a municipality of Windhoek, which is one of the biggest administration you would find in this country, which is run at the proximity of billions. So it's not easy. You would know that every time you go into a coalition, you are not 100% believing in the person you negotiate with, because you have history with each other. You also are skeptical at, is this person not going to deceive me in what we are proposing? Let's just take an example. What if in SA, ANC negotiate with DA, and then they go to the floor, they put up a president of ANC and a vice president of DA. And then the very same president who has the power now to elect ministers, go and elect people that are not in agreement. Where do you go? But you have already elected the president. What you now should do is follow the processes to remove the president, which has not easy processes. You must bring vote of no confidence and all these things. And that process. So the very same picture I'm putting is the one that one would have in the city of Windhoek, where you would have to negotiate with another party to see how you share the leadership, how you govern, how your interests are put forward. And because you see in negotiations, you cannot go into negotiations if your opponent, you have not located your opponent's special parts and you have twisted them. Because the person you negotiate with must also be willing to come to the table. If he's in a better position, he would not always come. Like we are seeing in the MK aspect, they say, no, we are not interested to speaking to you. We'll call you, don't call us. So if one is at that position, it's very difficult also to come into the room of discussion. But the main important aspect is, how do you share these powers? Are they short-term, long-term? Do I want to share leadership with this person only for 12 months, 15 years, and or 5 years, or 3 years? But the biggest downfall of our local governments, especially the municipalities, is the councillors. Sometimes, once they are elected, they are listening to their political structures. They have been controlled by the secretary generals or the leaders of these organizations. Then what they have decided sometimes into the administration fall out when they go back to report or give the final decision with the respective parties. So if people come from different homes, it's very difficult to manage them. But be that as it may, I believe that for the first time, we have seen the Windhoek municipality run by the coalition, by coalitions, by the parties that are there for the first time. And we should give ourselves credit. Why am I saying? When a child is born today, you don't expect that child to run. You expect that child to learn how to speak, how to walk, and all these things. And through the coalition difficulties of the city of Windhoek, you know the dramas that went there.
Yes.
If we do not take that as a learning curve, maybe if our elections in November comes at the close proximity of the South African votes, we know that SWAPO has been losing votes. They have not been gaining them. They are not losing votes because other people have done something to them. They are losing votes because of their arrogance, leadership, and corrupt administration. And it's a testimony because they have ministers that are in jail and all these things. So they are losing votes. They are now desperately going into campaigns and saying, don't speak to Olsen, don't speak to who they are what, but they are not bringing forth what they are going to do in the next 5 years. And here you see new parties coming. And the parties that we are already knowing are not all. We have a secret of few parties that are also coming, that are at the door of the ECN. So there are a lot that would be happening between now and November. So the writing out what is happening in South Africa, coming to Namibian doorstep, is something that we should not write off. Because we must know also, when anything happens in South Africa, it affects us. And we copy most of our things from South African administration, politics, economy, and everything. So we are literally just another province of South Africa. Let's be honest, because we are interdependent to South Africa in our actions and behavior. The only thing that we do not copy from them is the radical political actions that they took, that is taking place. You would see from the elections that is taking place in South Africa, how many people have died through political actions. This we do not see in Namibia. So other than that, we might experience what we are seeing in South Africa, which will have a good effect if we can get the very same picture that is currently in South Africa, where political parties are forced, because these politicians go into the street and sell us dreams that might not be a reality. So if we can push them to come on one table and say you are claiming to be leaders of this country, sit in one table, we have not given you a majority vote, we said share the leadership. I give you 40%, I give him 20%, I give him 15%. That is the voters' results that I'm talking of. So on that basis, share your leadership amongst the votes that we have given you in order to find a proper direction for this country. And in most aspects, in terms of Africa, we don't get that right. To be honest, we don't get that right because of our selective, inherent human nature. Because a human being is by nature selective. You can have 5 children. Out of the 5 children, you don't give them the same attention as all. So, but that is what we are probably anticipating might come to the Namibian doorstep.
Thank you so much for joining me joining us rather on the Evening Review.
Thanks for having me.
That concludes this evening's recording. Good night.